Matt Busby is perhaps the most important figure in the history of Manchester United. He turned the club into giants of English football before a huge part of his team was decimated by tragedy. He did, however, manage to turn things around and bring the club back to the top. Without Busby, Manchester United would be nowhere near the club they are today, and they will forever be in his debt. This is a story of Matt Busby, the man who made Manchester United. Matt Busby was born in the mining village of Orbiston in Lanarkshire, Scotland on the 26th of May 1909. Busby would accompany his father down the mines until his father was called up to fight in the First World War. Busby's father would lose his life after being shot by a sniper in 1917. Busby was obsessed with football as a boy, and after a failed attempt by his mother to move the family to America, he would combine his job as a coal miner with playing part-time football. Busby was soon signed up by Manchester City, and at the age of 18, he put pen to paper on a one-year contract worth £5 a week. He would make his debut the next year, and playing as an inside left, he finished his first season in the first team with 5 goals in 11 appearances. He was later converted to a defender by manager Peter Hodge, and over the next few years, he would make over 200 appearances for the club, winning the FA Cup in 1934. He was sold to Liverpool for £8,000 in 1936 and soon established himself in the side, later becoming captain. But when the Second World War came about, Busby's playing career would come to an end. Busby would spend time in the army as a physical trainer, whilst also turning out in friendly matches for the likes of Aldershot, Chelsea, Middlesbrough and others. After the war, Busby was offered a position on Liverpool's coaching staff, but due to a difference of opinion with the Liverpool board, he would pursue other opportunities. Matt Busby was good friends with Louis Rocker, a member of Manchester United's board, and Rocker wrote a letter to Busby offering him the job. In February 1945, Busby would meet with Manchester United chairman James W. Gibson. He told Gibson that he wanted full control over training, team selection and transfers without interference from the board. With Manchester United desperate for a manager, Gibson had no choice but to agree, and Matt Busby was appointed as Manchester United manager on a 5-year deal. Before Busby officially took the reins in October 1945, he would return to the physical training corps, working with the army in Bari, Italy. Whilst there, he met former West Bromwich Albion defender Jimmy Murphy. Busby would end up offering a place on his coaching staff to Murphy, a position that was accepted by the Welshman. At the time, Manchester United were a sleeping giant, having not won a major honour since the league in 1911, and had spent many years as a yo-yo team. Busby and Murphy were keen to change that. Matt Busby quickly changed the team's fortunes, leading them to second place in the league in his first season. They would finish runners-up again the next campaign, and in 1948 they had a chance to win their first silverware under Busby when they reached the FA Cup final. Manchester United would be up against the Blackpool side of the likes of Stan Mortensen and Stanley Matthews in their team. They took to the Wembley turf, aiming to win only their second FA Cup. Blackpool took the lead in the 12th minute from the penalty spot, but John Rowley would level for United in the 28th minute. Stan Mortensen put Blackpool back in front 10 minutes from time, and Blackpool would hold on to their lead for a lengthy period. But in the 70th minute, Rowley got his second to level the game, and 10 minutes later, Stanley Pearson put Manchester United in front, and the cup was settled when John Anderson got United's 4th. 3 years on from joining the club, Matt Busby had taken Manchester United to their first major honour in 37 years. The last time they had won a trophy, Matt Busby was 2 years old. The first trophy had been claimed, but Busby was desperate to get his hands on the league title. They would finish second place for the 4th time under his spell in 1951, but the next season they would go one better. 30 Jack Rowley goals played a key part as Manchester United won the league in 1952, 41 years on from their last success. Matt Busby had truly proved himself now, but he was keen for more success. Whilst these players had won Busby 2 major honours, they were starting to show their age, and Busby decided that young, fresh talent was needed. Busby dove into the Manchester United Junior Athletic Club for new talent, one that had scouted the best young players across the British Isles, with a system that Jimmy Murphy said would help the players bond by having them grow up together. Young players such as Billy Whelan, Jackie Blanchflower, David Pegg and Duncan Edwards would be integrated into the team over the next few years, thrown in as teenagers and becoming known as the Busby Babes. It would take time to mould the team into a successful one, but eventually the success came in style. In 1956, Manchester United stormed to the league title, winning it by 11 points. The squad was formed largely of players who had come through the youth ranks, with incredible players across the squad. The strike partnership of Tommy Taylor and Dennis Viollet netted a combined 45 goals, whilst Duncan Edwards displayed skills far beyond his years in the centre of midfield. The team scored a total of 103 goals that season, and the squad had an average age of just 22. Matt Busby was offered the manager's job at Real Madrid in 1956, with club president Santiago Bernabeu telling him that the job was managing paradise. Busby would turn the offer down, stating, "Manchester is my heaven." Around this time, football was about to change forever. The European Cup had recently been formed, and Manchester United were invited to partake as winners of their domestic league. The FA did not want Manchester United to partake, but Busby ignored their wishes and entered the competition. Their first ever venture into the European Cup resulted in a 12-0 aggregate win over Anderlecht. During the 56-57 campaign, a young forward called Bobby Charlton was handed his debut by the club and would net twice on his debut, fittingly against Charlton. The Red Devils went unbeaten in their first 12 league games and once again stormed to the title, winning by 8 points. They would also reach the FA Cup final, but lost 2-1 to Aston Villa. Their maiden venture in the European Cup was remarkable, as they had defeated Borussia Dortmund and Athletic Bilbao to reach the semi-finals. They fought valiantly against a mighty Real Madrid side, but would lose 5-3 on aggregate. It had been another incredible season, and with Manchester United qualifying for the European Cup again, the next campaign was seen to be the huge one. The club prepared for an assault on all three fronts, with expectations that a treble was on the cards. They started the season well, winning the Charity Shield, and after a 3-3 draw with Red Star Belgrade on the 5th of February 1958, they reached the semi-finals of the European Cup again. Everything was looking up for the Red Devils, but only the next day, their whole world was torn apart. Manchester United's flight from Belgrade would stop in Munich to refuel. 2 takeoff attempts were made, but were both aborted due to issues with the plane engine. The players returned to the airport lounge as snow began to descend. The passengers were called back on board, with a 3rd attempt to take off to be made. The plane picked up speed along the runway, but failed to take off, before skidding off the runway and crashing. Goalkeeper Harry Gregg regained consciousness shortly after the crash. He initially assumed he was dead, but soon rushed into action, pulling people out of the plane to save their lives. 2 of those that were dragged from the plane were Bobby Charlton and Dennis Viollet. 23 people would die in the crash. 3 Manchester United staff, in Secretary Walter Crickmer and coaches Tom Curry and Bert Worley, lost their lives. 8 players would also die as a result, with Jeff Bent, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor and Billy Whelan dying at the scene, whilst Duncan Edwards would die of his injuries 15 days later. Johnny Berry and Jackie Blanchflower survived, but their injuries meant that they would never play again. Matt Busby survived, but suffered multiple injuries and was twice given the last rites in hospital. He was not aware of the extent of the crash until 3 weeks later, as the doctors felt he was not strong enough to hear the news. Busby wanted to leave Old Trafford following the crash, horrified by what had happened, and feeling responsible for the players' deaths by insisting that Manchester United participate in the European Cup. Eventually, he was persuaded to stay by his wife Jean, who told him that those who lost their lives would have wanted him to carry on. Busby would not return to full management duties until the next season, with Jimmy Murphy, who had been away with Wales during the Munich air disaster, taking charge of the team. Busby had told Murphy from his hospital bed to keep the flag flying. Murphy would begin to put the club back together whilst Busby recovered, and would incredibly lead Manchester United to the FA Cup final, but there was no fairy tale ending, as they would lose 2-0 to Bolton. Busby would return to the hot seat, faced with the task of rebrandishing the team decimated by tragedy. They would finish as runners-up in the league, with Bobby Charlton netting 29 goals in all competitions. The club would not win any major trophies over the next few years, but Busby was still building a new side. With Bobby Charlton and Bill Foulkes shining bright, young players such as Albert Quixel, Dennis Law and David Hurd were also brought into the side. Busby wanted desperately to avenge those who had lost their lives in Munich. And in 1963, he had the chance. Manchester United reached the FA Cup final, where they would face Leicester. It was a chance for the club to win their first FA Cup since 1948, and more importantly, their first major honour since the disaster. The Red Devils took to the field, up against Leicester City. Manchester United had finished a pitiful 19th in the league that season, but if they could take the cup home, it would all be forgotten. Dennis Law gave Manchester United the lead in the 30th minute, and David Hurd got the second in the 57th minute. Leicester would net with 10 minutes to go to shake things up, but a second from Hurd would seal the FA Cup for Manchester United. It was a huge moment for the club. Once again, Matt Busby had taken the club from the ashes and delivered them to major glory. He refused to be defeated by the disaster and had overcome the odds that were stacked against him, and even more glory was on the way. Manchester United finished second the next season, with a young George Best making his debut. And the year after, they were finally back at the top of the pile. Manchester United defeated Leeds to the league title on goal difference, thanks to a huge goal-scoring output. Dennis Law scored 39 goals in all competitions, whilst David Hurd would get 28, John Connolly 20, Bobby Charlton 18, and George Best 14. Busby and Murphy had truly built another great side, and they would continue to fight for more honours. Whilst the next season would prove fruitless, another league title followed in 1967. The next season was pivotal. It was 10 years on from the Munich air disaster, and Manchester United were in the European Cup again. They had the opportunity to pay the perfect tribute to their fallen heroes. They would agonisingly miss out on the league title on the last day of the season to Man City, but their European run was looking promising. Wins over Maltese side Hibernians, Yugoslav side Sarajevo and Polish side Górnik Zabrze saw them into the semi-finals, where they would face Real Madrid, a team who had already won the trophy 6 times. A George Best goal saw Manchester United win 1-0 at Old Trafford in the first leg, and they would head to Madrid to seal the tie. But in the second leg, at half-time, it looked as though the dream was dead. Real Madrid were 3-1 up and had played United off the park. The players entered a silent dressing room. Eventually, Busby calmly addressed them, saying they had been playing great football all season, and simply asked them to go out there and play like he knew they could. It eased the pressure on the players, and they emerged onto the Bernabeu turf inspired. A goal from David Sadler and an own goal took the scores to 3-3. Manchester United would advance to their first ever European Cup final. Manchester United would face Eusebio's Benfica in the final on the 29th of May 1968. Manchester United arrived at Wembley determined to bring the trophy home, with many backing them, hoping that they could do it for the Busby Babes. Over 92,000 people were in the stadium, with another 250 million estimated to be watching the game on TV. Manchester United were the better team in the first half, but could not break through the tough Benfica defence. Eusebio also had a few chances, hitting the woodwork and drawing a save from Alex Stepney, but he couldn't find the net. The game went to half-time at 0-0, but soon in the second half, the deadlock would be broken. In the 53rd minute, David Sadler crossed the ball into the box, and Bobby Charlton leapt high to head the ball into the net and give Manchester United the lead. With only 11 minutes to go, however, a half volley from Grasser levelled the scores for Benfica. With only minutes to go, Eusebio fired a shot at goal, but Stepney caught it. Eusebio would go up to Stepney and applaud him for his save. A winner could not be found, and so extra time was needed. Manchester United players were exhausted, but Busby demanded one more push from them to seal the famous trophy. The rejuvenated Red Devils then blitzed their way through the Portuguese side. In the 92nd minute, George Best rounded Enrique before placing the ball into the net. And only 2 minutes later, Brian Kidd, on his 19th birthday, headed in a rebound to make it 3-1. And in the 99th minute, Bobby Charlton sealed it once and for all by curling the ball into the net. It was fitting that the cup be sealed by one of the surviving Busby babes. Full time soon came, and Manchester United had done it. 10 years after being decimated by losing 8 players, they had gone above and beyond what they had achieved before. Bobby Charlton walked up the steps and lifted the European Cup. Bobby Charlton and Bill Foulkes, the only Munich air disaster survivors left on the pitch, had defied all the odds stacked against them. Joyous scenes followed on the pitch as the players embraced Busby, knowing what the victory meant to him. The world of football smiled at perhaps the greatest redemption story in its history. Matt Busby was on top of the footballing world, but he was coming to the end of his time at the hot seat. He would retire as manager in 1969, remaining at the club as director, before a brief spell as caretaker manager in the 70-71 season. He would remain a director of the club for 11 years and was made club president in 1980. Matt Busby died on the 20th of January 1994 at the age of 84. The year before, he had seen Manchester United win their first top-flight title since he was the club's manager. Busby was honoured with a minute's silence before the club's next game, and Manchester United would go on to win the first double in the club's history that season, winning the league and FA Cup to honour Matt Busby's memory. In 1999, Manchester United won their second European Cup to seal a treble on what would have been Matt Busby's 90th birthday. A statue of Busby stands outside Old Trafford to commemorate the man who both made and saved the club. Matt Busby is one of the most inspirational figures in the history of football. He brought a struggling Manchester United back to the top, and even though the world tore apart his life in the Munich snow, Busby fought back to rebuild the club and take them to the pinnacle of European football.